Whenever William Friedkin's film The Boys in the Band is brought up, the first words that come to mind are groundbreaking and dated. Based on Mark Crowley's 1968 off-Broadway play, Boys was a radically new depiction of gay life than had ever been seen before in a Hollywood film. This is why it will always be seen as obviously groundbreaking. But because the script for the play was written and conceived in a time just before Stonewall was to kick off the gay rights movement, the characters exist frozen in a moment before the idea of positive gay identity or self-esteem was even an agreed-upon concept amongst people within the gay community. This is why the film feels, to many, painfully dated. However, the truth is that so many fascinating works of social criticism and activism come to occupy this netherworld of being both appreciated and resented at the same time. This is the very nature of being cutting edge. Art that avoids controversial issues and negative depictions of people often has a longer shelf life. If you just leave marginalized characters out of your story, there's less chance that your film will come to be seen in the future as a cringeworthy relic, but there's also less chance of it affecting the culture as deeply in its own time. Whatever you want to say about Boys in the Band, as riddled with self-loathing and stereotypes as it may be, no one can deny this is a piece of cinema that made its mark on history.
Welcome to Kale Your Idols, a new Hollywood podcast with your hosts,
Sam Ludwig
and Elena Gibson. This is a podcast about film. Primarily, we discuss movies, directors, actors, and writers known for their work during the new Hollywood era of studio filmmaking that began in 1967 with Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate, and pretty much ended in the early 80s with One from the Heart and Heaven's Gate. In this episode, we are discussing the revolutionary yet controversial film, The Boys in the Band. We should specify we're talking about the 1970s version of The Boys in the Band, not the 2020 remake, The Boys in the Band, which Netflix released during the pandemic.
Right, which I think, is a kind of a good place to start with because there's a number of points of contrast where this play, it's not like the greatest play that's ever been written. It's a great play, but it's certainly stagey and it has some tricky elements, more of a revolutionary step forward in representation rather than like a great literary masterpiece. And I do think that some of the problems with the remake, they sort of showcase some of the middling aspects of the play in a way, and also just the casting and the way that a lot of things are approached. It's Netflix. It's got this certain cast of people that it wants to use, and also just the way that gay people are perceived and exist in popular culture now. I think that it's actually kind of an interesting place to start from. Yeah, at least how this play was perceived and how it was done in 2020, 50 years after the original movie. So what did you think of the remake?
Well, I do want to say, first of all, that I do think the script is great. You said that perhaps it's not the most amazing play in the world, but it is not just important because of its representation. Like, I genuinely think that there are really good character dynamics and really interesting dialogue at different parts throughout the play.
But one glaring flaw of it being way too theatery for a section, I would say, that we'll get into later. I would say the play suffers from a certain kind of theatrical contrivance that kind of takes over the middle part of it. Would you not agree?
Sure. It has some contrivance in it for sure. In terms of comparing the remake to the original, yeah, the remake, well, I think the original has much better acting to begin with. Like, the remake, they cast recognizable actors. It stars the guy from The Big Bang Theory, Jim Parsons, who plays Michael, and it also stars Zachary Quinto playing Harold. I know Zachary Quinto best from playing Siler in Heroes. So these are guys that most people have seen their faces, even if they don't know their names. And yeah, it basically, they did the exact thing that the original movie didn't do. When Mark Crowley, the creator and screenwriter of the play that this movie is based off of, when his play gained fame and then also notoriety, he was approached by a number of studios to adapt the play into a movie. However, their requirement was that he would have to cast well-known Hollywood actors. And Crowley refused because he only wanted to do the movie if he could use the original cast from the play. And so he held out until he found a way to make the film with the original cast. He also wanted to use the original director from the stage play as well, but that was one thing where he had to compromise and had to go with a different director who had some experience making films. That's ultimately how Friedkin came into the picture. But Crowley's insistence on using the original actors results in much better acting throughout the film compared to the remake, where they're not really pulling off the performances very well. I like some people in the remake. Like, I like the actor who plays Hank in the remake. I like his work a lot. But yeah, the acting is definitely not as good. And as you mentioned, the edginess just isn't really there as much. And part of the reason, I think, is because they weren't leaning into the negativity surrounding these guys' experiences in the play in the remake. The remake is more of a celebration of the original piece rather than exploring the different personalities and troubles and lives of the characters in the play.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of problems, but you're essentially touching on the thing. When we watched a behind-the-scenes featurette on the remake, they're all talking about it as like this celebration of gay identity and that it's about like gay pride. And they're very proud that all of the actors in the remake are out gay men, which is great, but it's also like then clearly adds this atmosphere of they're all very attuned to representing their characters in a very humanistic and realistic way according to them and the way that they experience gay life in 2020. Also, it's just the fact that they're all famous really does take away something of the power. These actors in the original version, the Friedkin version, I mean, we'll talk about their lives, which many of which were not very happy, but this was the only movie that a lot of them made. None of them came out of the closet, even after the movie came out. Most of the actors in the original were gay, but they did not out themselves. And yeah, so the negativity is missing, but also it's a weird miscalibration too when you're having to have famous people, because Jim Parsons, I would say, playing Michael in the remake, he's all wrong for the part. He's not quite bitchy enough. He's not quite, this feels weird to say, but he's not quite handsome enough, or he's like Slade. He doesn't quite look wolfish enough. And Zachary Quinto playing Harold, like, he's not unattractive enough in a way. Like, everything is all, there's a blandening. Yeah, it's like they're edgeless and weirdly sexless too, even though they're all these guys who are more comfortable with their homosexuality than the guys in the original. But Friedkin, and we'll get into this, he has such an eye for masculinity and masculine sexuality. And yeah, there's just absolutely no sex, no edge in the remake. And that's what ultimately kills it. And there's a number of other things. It's just the play is a little bit weird in a modern context. And it maybe is something that sort of should be a little bit left to history unless you're going to try and really, really do it. But then it just feels like it would be very hard to find gay actors who would want to go there with the full level of self-loathing that the characters portray in the piece, you know?
I do think, though, that it is a cool thing to remake. You know, in terms of all the remakes out there, it's such a small, obscure piece that I really like that Netflix decided to remake it, even though they kind of defanged it a bit.
And Netflix is sort of weirdly, like, they sort of have an interest in plays. Like, I'm interested in seeing how they go with the August Wilson Century Cycle play adaptations. I thought The Piano Lesson was very interesting as far as a Netflix thing goes. But yeah, Boys in the Band, it's cool that they did it. I mean, Ryan Murphy produced it for them, which makes sense. I sort of see how all the connections would lead to something like that happening. It's an incredibly uncommercial project for Netflix.
Okay, I want to, for the listeners to this episode who have never seen this movie or this play, let's first just give a brief overview of what happens in the movie. So this will be really short because it's pretty simple. This movie is about a birthday party. Specifically, there's this character, Harold. It's his birthday, and his friends are gathering at Michael's apartment to celebrate. And the friends all arrive before Harold does. They interact with one another. They're having fun. However, while they're prepping for the party, Michael receives a phone call from his old college roommate, Alan, who is crying on the phone and wants to come see Michael. There is constantly wishy-washy back and forth from Alan about whether or not Alan will come over, but eventually Alan comes over and Michael is nervous around him because he was not out in college, and all of the friends gathered for Harold's birthday party, they're all gay men. So this movie is about gay men interacting with one another. There are different dynamics between each other because they're not all just perfectly good friends. They all have very intricate relationships with one another, which I think is pretty subtle, actually, in some ways. And I'd love to talk about that later. And then they have to deal with this presumably straight, although maybe not quite straight, newcomer coming in and judging them.
He seems more straight in the remake and more ambiguous in the original, which is really, I don't understand what they're doing with Alan's character in the remake.
You think the remake decides that he's straight?
I don't think it decides it necessarily. Well, maybe it does. The remake clearly makes a number of decisions, which you kind of do when you're directing a play, which is like, let's add a little extra something to this relationship. They make Michael a little bit more obviously like in love with Donald in the remake, but just kind of with a look. And it's like, okay, I guess that added something. But they have the original in their mind when you're remaking it. And it's a, the play has to be the play. So they're looking for all these little things to dial up or down to emphasize different things. And I do think that Alan comes off as much straighter or much more straightforwardly having a problem and being misinterpreted by these guys in the remake as opposed to the original, where the guy's performance is very mysterious.
Yeah, so the character of Alan, he's interesting. He's homophobic, especially towards Emery, who's a character in the play who is particularly flamboyant. But there is a lot of question about whether or not he is himself gay. In the original, everybody would come away with their own opinion about whether he was or wasn't in the closet. Mark Crowley, the creator of this, said that he prefers to keep it ambiguous in his own head whether or not Alan is gay. So Crowley himself had not made a decision. And the stage director of the original play had told Peter White, the actor who played Alan, to aim for half of the audience coming away thinking he's gay and half thinking he's straight. So he really did try to do the performance straight down the middle of you not being clear one way or the other. And so I think that leads to that performance giving you a lot to think about that character of Alan.
Well, he's got some secret that you never find out in the play. And just the fact that he has something that he's ashamed of and private and secret that he's not comfortable talking about automatically makes him allied with the rest of the men at the birthday party, even though he does not want to see himself as having much in common with gay people because, as you say, he's very outwardly homophobic. But it's kind of, even in 1968, his homophobia comes off as protesting too much.
Yeah. This movie is accused of having a lot of stereotypes, and we'll get into them. But I think that a lot of the times, though, the characters are more complex than they might initially seem. And Alan is not always just the most obvious version of somebody who's homophobic but actually closeted. Like he outwardly says a number of times, like, oh, that guy is very handsome or something like that, which somebody who's just deeply afraid of being perceived as gay wouldn't say those things, really. At least I don't think so.
Right, and he has a violent confrontation with Emery, who it really bothers him how swishy Emery is. But then they reconcile, and Alan, I think, is clearly by the end of the play a bit of an audience surrogate and is meant to come around a little bit to seeing the pain and empathizing with gay people more.
Definitely, yeah. He's definitely kind of the audience surrogate. And the director, William Friedkin, he specifically said something he was kind of trying to do throughout the film was to frame the movie as if it's from Alan's perspective most of the time, to put you in his place and see the things the way he's seeing them. I think that confrontation you mentioned earlier between Emery and Alan, that's one of those things that was defanged a bit in the remake. When I watched the original, after having watched the remake, I was struck by how horrific that scene is in the original. Like the blood and the violence of Emery getting punched, it was just... You really felt the threat of violence towards gay men back in that era.
And a lot of this is also coming from Friedkin. This is an early film for Friedkin, and this is the first film that I've seen of his where he's really letting loose a little bit with some flashier camera work that he would sort of become to be known by. Like, I watched The Birthday Party, which is another play adaptation, also about a birthday party, that he made right before The Boys in the Band. And that play is very different. I didn't really love the movie. It's a Harold Pinter play. There's a lot of pauses. It's very... people's kind of staring at each other, and it's very slow. But The Boys in the Band, even though it's set in one room, has a lot of frenetic camera work, a lot of really interesting choices that we could get at. There's some cool shots where like Harold beckons Cowboy to him and it's like a close up of his finger beckoning. There's a weird shot where Michael is taking off a shirt and the camera follows the bottom of the shirt up. It follows his arms over his head and then the shirt being thrown on the ground in a way that's kind of jerky. But in the Emery Allen fight, you really feel Friedkin there because that's when he starts busting out his like famous shaky cam kind of stuff, and it gets it really adds to the confusion and scariness of this moment of violence breaking out.
Okay, so you've got these guys all getting ready for their friend's birthday party. The Alan character becomes hostile towards Emery, and things are just really unraveling. And at that moment, Harold, the birthday boy, shows up, and he is this character that just takes up so much space in any room. He is just this massive presence, and he has one of the greatest entrances and exits of any character in a movie. Let's just play his famous line when Michael is mocking him for showing up so late.
Happy birthday, Harold.
You're stoned and you're late. You were supposed to arrive at this location at approximately 8:30-9 o'clock.
What I am, Michael, is a 32-year-old, ugly, pockmarked Jew fairy. And if it takes me a while to pull myself together, and if I smoke a little grass before I get up the nerve to show my face to the world, it's nobody's goddamn business but my own. And how are you this evening?
And it's just a really astounding entrance into the film.
So Harold is, as he says, he's high. He's late to the party because he needed to get high before coming to a social gathering. And I just really think this is interesting because it's like the play comes out in 1968 and they're all sort of mocking Harold for needing to smoke grass. But it's like Harold is just, he's discovering pot at the same time as the culture is. I just like thinking about him being like, oh, wow, this is great for like reducing my anxiety. There's all these new things in this play, subtly new 60s things. Like there's all this talk about lasagna. One of the people's like never seen it before and they're like making fun of him and stuff.
I do want to say one thing. The actor who played Harold, Leonard Frey, said that one of the worst parts about doing the play and then the movie was eating all that lasagna. And that in the play, he had to eat a bunch of Chef Boyardee lasagna every single night in the second act. And that sucked. In the movie, they hired women to cook lasagnas. And so they like cooked like 50 different lasagnas. And so the lasagnas were much better tasting, but he had to eat it all throughout the day when they were shooting those scenes. And he said it was really difficult to do all of that.
And it doesn't really look very good. It's not very appealing looking food photography in the film.
Harold is such an interesting character because he's so obsessed with the way he looks and the way he presents himself, but he also is presented as somebody who's very gluttonous in a lot of ways. He has like maybe perhaps a binge eating problem, and one of his character traits is that he is covered in pox on his face because he has tweezed all of his pores to the point of ruining his face, which is such a very specific character detail. And it makes sense though, because Mark Crowley said that Harold is based on somebody he knew in real life. So I think that that's one of the reasons why that character is so rich, is because he is based off of a real person.
And all of them are. All of the guys are based on specific people. I think Michael is based on Crowley himself. But the thing with Harold is that he's presented as this person who is in some ways, weaker. He's less attractive than the rest of the guys. He's more anxious. He anxiously tweezes his pores. And yet, in the course of this night that we see him, he's high the whole time. And like, this is actually a really great performance of being high. I would say, especially compared to Zachary Quinto in the remake, who's very bad, doesn't seem high at all. Like Leonard Frey is fantastic in this movie, seeming just high and in the background. You believe that it's giving him this artificial confidence. He is talking about himself as if he is the least confident of any of the guys, but he's acting as if he is the most self-assured because he is high. And the rest of them, a lot of people in this play are like in analysis, really struggling with their identity, struggling with their life. They're all a lot of them view themselves as unlucky in love. And Harold is just kind of high. Like he's discovered weed that makes kind of some of these feelings go away a little bit.
I think that's a really interesting observation because The character of Michael is the one hosting the party, and Michael and Harold, they have this frenemies situation going on.
One of the great cinematic depictions of nemesis.
They are perhaps closer as friends than anybody else in the play. When they're all giving Harold their birthday presents, Michael, at this point, so what happens is Michael gets really drunk once Alan hits Emery, and then his drunkenness results in him being a total asshole to everybody at the party and just being just a complete drunken mess and mean towards people. But when they're all exchanging gifts with Harold, Michael's gift is a picture of him, and it has an inscription. And Harold is clearly very touched by the inscription on the picture, but he won't share it, and he won't say out loud what it is. And that's one of the great off-screen things in the play and in the movie is like, I really want to know what Michael wrote to Harold, and you never find out. But it really hints at this deep personal connection that we as the audience will never truly understand. But then towards each other throughout the course of the night that we actually see on screen, they're just like at each other's throats and trying to outmaneuver one another in terms of being as bitchy as possible and really calling out real truths about character flaws in each other. But I think you pointing out that Harold's personality, you have to take into the fact that he's high and it's giving him this false confidence that night. I also think it's really important to take into account Michael's behavior as being a result of alcoholism. So a lot of people criticize this film as depicting these men as being way too bitchy and catty towards each other, and it being a bad representation of gay characters by presenting them this way. But in my opinion, it's really just Michael who's the one who comes off the most bitchy and catty. And the play and the movie clearly set up the fact that he's only being that way because of alcoholism, which he's struggled with. And he tried to stay sober most of the party. And the only reason he started drinking was because Alan punched Emery. And he feels deeply uncomfortable about feeling forced in the closet with his old roommate coming back on the scene and all of his friends around and feelings of shame. And he's also Catholic. So his guilt around being gay and Catholic at the same time. And so, yeah, I just think that the characters' relationships with substances affecting their behavior at that party is super interesting. All right, so Harold shows up. Alan is making everybody super uncomfortable with his homophobia. Michael's getting super drunk, and then the night just unravels into just a really bad time for everybody. And Michael insists on them all playing this game called the telephone game, which maybe we'll talk about in a bit, where everybody is forced to reveal some personal stuff that maybe they didn't want to reveal or think about some personal things that they don't want to revisit. And the party seems like a total disaster, and you're worried what is going to be the final outcome. Then the party ends, and everybody goes home.
Yeah, and Harold's like, I'll see you tomorrow, Michael. Nothing has been changed. I guess Alan might walk away from this maybe not wanting to see Michael again or whatever, but pretty much everybody's relationship is the same. Some of them have maybe been brought a little bit closer together. The one kind of bitchy negative side that is shown other than from Michael is Emery and Bernard have this relationship where Emery is like the swishiest one and Bernard is black. And Emery is like always making racist jokes to Bernard, and Bernard's kind of like, okay, like, and he's clearly like accepts it, like this is just their relationship. So that's like not pleasant to watch. But then Michael, the dick, calls Emery out for that and calls Bernard out for letting him. This whole play and the nature of these portrayals and the negativity and the way that it's presenting this group of people, I think is really complicated because you have to understand that this play and this movie was showing stuff that had never been seen in a movie before. And by that, I mean gay characters who don't flat out kill themselves at the end of the movie. There had never been depictions of gay characters who survive the whole story to the end and don't come to a tragic end that's going to teach the audience a lesson about straying too far from the path. But because of the context from which homosexuality was viewed by mainstream culture, it almost feels like this play feels the need to Trojan horse into humanity of these characters by showing them be assholes. Like, the audience will never get to the point where we can accept these characters if it doesn't see them as in some way super troubled.
Yeah, Pauline Kael, the film critic, she's one of the few critics at the time who did not like the movie when it came out. I mean, the movie had its own controversy when it came out, but critics typically liked it. Kale did not like it at all. But one of the things she said is that the message of the movie is basically, we homosexuals may talk like bitches and give you a laugh by degrading ourselves, but we have feelings too. And so I think she didn't like that it was a bit too simplistic in that sense. And I don't think it's simplistic. I do think that there is a lot of stuff going on in the film. But in her mind, it was just trying to get across the message, we have feelings, don't be assholes to us. And I think that's a gross simplification of the movie's message.
When you want to talk about how dated this movie feels, a lot of people, like, I remember I watched this movie, and okay, I'll just flat out say, I the first time I saw Boys in the Band, I was so blown away. I think this movie is really cool, really great. It just, there's so many stuff to talk about. It's you never seen anything like it. I talked about it with a friend of mine who's an older gay man. I was like, you ever see the Boys in the Band? He was like, oh, yeah, I know. I remember that. I saw that. I didn't really like it. I was like, really? He was like, yeah, I think it made me feel bad. Made me kind of feel really bad. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And so I'm in this context of being like, oh, I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. But so what you have to understand is people watch the movie, especially gay people watch this movie now, and they're like, oh my God, they don't even know if they want to say like, this is a realistic depiction of something that happened ever. Maybe people were like that back then and they're not like that now or whatever. But what you have to understand is by the time the movie had come out, it had already gained a reputation of being not exactly beloved by gay people. Like, I mean, gay people have always thought of this play and the movie as like something of a gay minstrel show. Now, this kind of happens with everything that is like this. As I say, like almost any piece of work that touches on groups of people that you don't see every day is going to it's just going to date really quickly. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's not just that this play seems a really far-reaching back look at the past. It was viewed as pretty negative and potentially harmful at the time by the people it was about.
Yeah, this play opened 1 year before the Stonewall riots. So it opened before what is often considered the start of the gay rights movement, which meant that at a time you could go see the play and then go out for a drink at a gay bar and get arrested for drinking at a gay bar.
Homosexuality was considered a mental illness until like 1973 and whatever version of the DSM came out then. And the gay people in this play are like, yes, we have a mental illness. We need to go to therapy to figure out how to deal with this problem we have. It's disturbing to watch. But then the play is clearly not really believing that, you know, like it's showing these characters being wrong in a way, even though it doesn't feel fully comfortable saying that.
I don't think the play is at all making the characters seem like they think they have a mental illness because they're gay. I think if they're all seeing analysts, it's because of the way society is treating them. I think Michael's the only one who is not really accepting of who he is. Sam's just shaking their head. I don't know. Mark Crowley, who wrote it, you know, he was a part of the gay scene and he wanted to depict gay characters. I don't know. I just didn't get that reading from it, that they all thought that there was something wrong with them for being gay. Like, that's not what I got at all.
Not all of them, but the ones that are in analysis, the implication is they're in analysis in order to cure themselves of homosexuality.
Okay. That was lost on me. That's the thing is, like, the historical context is so important for this movie. It's one of the reasons why the remake explicitly states in the beginning that this play is like that the movie you're going to see is set in 1968, because otherwise it doesn't make sense the way the characters are like presenting being gay. Because again, this play was written back when it was like basically illegal to be gay.
Michael has a line about, like, if we could only just stop hating ourselves so much. And it's as if he's talking about as if we could fly to Mars. It's really sad. I mean, but again, like, it's sad now to think about back then, but the play wanted you to be sad at the time.
Yeah, the play at first became really popular. It was an off-Broadway production, but it became really popular. But then when the gay rights movement started happening, the gay leaders at the time were really trying to move away from the self-hating portrayal, and they were really trying to push gay pride. And so they did not enjoy the play or the movie for that reason, because this play and this movie have flawed characters. They're not perfect representations of what activist leaders would want to show for trying to get a message across. But Mark Crowley, who wrote it, said that he had no agenda in writing this play except expressing himself. So he was not trying to present perfect representation of what it means to be gay. He was trying to show openly gay characters because that had not really been done before. Gay characters in the past, well, they had either been the butt of a joke, or they turned out to be the twisted villain, or, as Sam had mentioned, they would die in the film as some sort of metaphorical punishment for their quote-unquote sexual deviance. And the movie explicitly addresses this. One of the characters says, it's not all like in a play. The gay men don't always off themselves at the end. So he's addressing this stereotype.
Pretty sure he doesn't say gay men.
Oh, really? Does he? Yeah, I think I changed that because I didn't want to say the F word.
There's a lot of F-bombs flying in this movie, I should say. And the first use of the word cunt in a mainstream American film, by the way.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, the cunt part.
Should we be letting cunts fly in this episode? So like the idea of gay pride, again, like when it doesn't exist when this play is being written. And that's kind of one of the things you have to look at and see, like the fact that these characters are this proud is impressive. Like they are being themselves 100%, like in a community in which they all know they are all comfortable with each other and they all know how they act. But the thing is, it's in private. They can only be themselves in this secret little world that they've created. So I actually do think that the movie or the piece is deliberately showing a lot of gay pride. It's just that then that wouldn't be a story if they were just happy the whole time, you know, it's like you got to have some conflict. And I don't know. It's again, though, there is a certain contrivance, like playness aspect that does kind of creep into the writing sometimes. So one wonders if it did have to be so catty, like if they could have, if they could have maybe all banded together against Alan or something. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of this would be removing the complexity that makes it a work of art and not a polemic.
And in terms of the movie representing gay life, a lot of the people involved didn't view that as the main point of the movie. Like Friedkin, the director, said that looking back, it was clearly about portraying gay life through different characters, and that all the important lines of the movie are about the gay experience, but he wasn't thinking about it in those terms at the time of making the movie. Crowley said that what he was trying to explore in the play, among other things, was to learn how people become their own worst enemies. Lawrence Luckinbill, who plays Hank, said, it's about people trying to survive in a hostile environment. Leonard Frey thought the play was more about loneliness and self-destruction than it was about being gay. And then Kenneth Nelson, who played Michael, says, I don't think The Boys is about homosexuality as much as it is about a group of losers and their problems, which I think is hilarious.
You have to take all of these quotes, though, with a grain of salt, because this being in this movie ruined the careers of every person who acted in it. So not every person, but I'm just saying all of these quotes where they say, I didn't think it was really about being gay, are probably from interviews in which they're trying desperately to get out of this pigeonhole that they unfortunately put themselves in by being in this movie to some degree. But I also agree with what they're saying, but I think it needs to be clear that like people backing away from this being about gay life, I think, is a little bit born out of how much it affected their career and they saw it affected their career to some degree.
I don't think they all the actors involved view their careers as having been ruined by the play. I know that the only one who I found really seemed to actually think that was Robert Letourneau, who plays Tex, who is Emery's birthday present to Harold. And he said that it was the kiss of death for his career because then he couldn't be viewed as anything but a gay hustler. But the actor who plays Hank, he felt like Boys in the Band really allowed his career to take off. Although, to be honest, looking at his credits, he only did small stuff after Boys in the Band. Leonard Frey, he went on to do Model and Fiddler on the Roof.
1 year later, and then nothing else. This has a lot in common with the last episode we did, Fiddler, which is like, okay, fine, maybe it didn't totally ruin every person's career in this thing, but these guys are all best known for this. And the same was true of Fiddler. So it might not even just be playing a gay character. It might just be being in a prominent play adaptation is not a good thing for your career.
All of the actors were advised by their agents not to be in this play or in the movie because they were told it would ruin their careers. So a lot of them really connected with the script, really liked the characters, and they went against what their agents advised them to do. It is a shame that this is the most famous thing that any of them have done. I wish that their careers had turned out better, but it was so brave of them that they did it.
No, that's what I said. I mean, this is the kind of movie that it makes history. Like this is a movie that had an incredibly important impact on a group of people. This representation does matter. Some of the other guys had other successes. The guy who played Michael, he was actually in the original production of the Fantastics.
Yeah, but he was in that before Boys in the Band.
Right, exactly. So, this play has various controversies. The depiction of gay life, how much it's a gay play. The stereotypical portrayal specifically of Emery, played by Cliff Gorman, who was one of the straight actors in the original production, I should say, which does kind of make you look at that character a little bit askance, but drag me if you want. Not the most unrealistic portrayal of a human being that I've ever seen in my life. I do know people who are a hair's breadth away from Emery currently, like in the real world now, that are gay. Friedkin expressed some. He said he loved them. It's one of his favorite movies he's ever made. And if there was one thing he would have changed about the movie was how campy the portrayal of Emery was. And again, yeah, the fact that it was played, but that he was a straight actor doing it, I think makes it different. But yeah, what do you think of Emery as a character?
Yeah, Friedkin had said that Emery was the only character that the performance was influenced by the fact that he was gay. So he was the only character whose line deliveries and movement was taking into account a gay stereotype of being campy and flamboyant. And Friedkin had said in an interview, I hope you will take me at my word that I don't think of people in that way through stereotypes.
Because this was an early portrayal of gay life, it's taken as if it's this broad treatise on the nature of anybody who is attracted to the same sex. But this also really is depicting a very particular set of Upper West Side, late 60s, affluent gay guys, many of whom are in theater and who are a little bit flamboyant and theatrical. Like Michael has a touch of the theatricality too, but he's an actor, or something. He wanted to live in Hollywood. Now he's clearly a stage actor. And I think Harold is too.
To me, Emery's character didn't seem wildly unrealistic. He was over the top, but there are 9 different men in this play. 8 of them are known to be gay in the world of the play, and one of them is maybe, you don't know if he is gay or not. So then if you have 8 different portrayals of openly gay characters, they're all portrayed differently. I know some gay people are more flamboyant than other gay people. Like there is just such a spectrum. It's not like it was trying to capture all different types of personalities out there. It was just trying to capture a variety. And Crowley didn't feel like he was doing an agenda in terms of his portrayals of these characters. He was just trying to reflect people that he knew in his real life. So I didn't have a big problem with Emery. I'm not a gay man, so I can't speak to that, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
The piece isn't just portraying this identity, it's interrogating Emery's identity too. Emery comes into the play and he is a big temperature changing kind of character. Robin DeJesus in the remake, when we watched the featurette, he talked about he's like needing to get told to take up more space. Frankly, I think he didn't really take up quite enough space as Emery, in my opinion, in the remake. It could have been bigger. But they interrogate Emery's personality. Michael, when Alan starts talking about how uncomfortable Emery makes him, Michael starts getting very defensive. And it brings out a kind of gay pride in Michael that he doesn't seem to show in any other part of the movie, because he wants to say, no, I love Emery. Emery is great. And then when it shows Emery, the Uncle Tomming Bernard, that is shown to be, you are letting this flamboyant personality where you say whatever, kind of letting you get away with stuff. It's all very complex. None of it ever feels simplified.
In a way, Emery is the meanest of them all because he has all these different racial slurs, and that is criticized in the film. However, he's also in some ways the most compassionate. Like, Alan punches him and is annoyed by him because he seems too gay, and yet then later, Emery, who made the lasagna for the party, is like, is anybody going to take up a slice to Alan? And Michael's like, oh, what, you like Alan now? Like, he just punched you. What the fuck? And Emery and Bernard, they are characters who are very close with one another and kind of have their own best friend situation going on. And Emery takes care of Bernard when Bernard breaks down at the end of the film from playing the telephone game. And Emery seems to really, really care about what Harold thinks of him. Like, he really wants Harold to like his birthday present, which is the Hustler. He really wants Harold to like the lasagna he made. He seems to absolutely worship Harold. And there are certain things about his performance that are stereotypical, but he's also at the same time a very complex character.
Did you know that he and Leonard Frey, who we just talked about last week in Fiddler on the Roof, Cliff Gorman is also a returning actor. Did you know this? Yeah.
I did know that. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but we saw him before in the 8.5 episode where we talked about All That Jazz, because he played Lenny Bruce in All That Jazz. And I didn't recognize him, but yeah. So this play and then movie quickly became controversial and criticized by a lot of people in the gay community. Some people felt like this play and movie, that it was harmful because it scared people to come out, because a lot of them felt that they didn't want to become like these characters since they seemed so miserable. Others felt really inspired by open depictions of gay characters, especially there are two characters, Larry and Hank, who are in a relationship with one another. And their relationship has problems. They seem like maybe they're going to break up throughout the course of the play, but then they reconcile with one another. Hank, in particular, is this character that is perceived by everybody as being assumed to be straight because he's very masculine and looks like an athlete. And Alan, when he arrives at the party, he just wants to talk to Hank the whole time because he perceives Hank as straight like him.
Hank is also explicitly bisexual.
With a strong preference, is what Michael said. Yeah. Bisexual with a strong preference. So, but I appreciate that they bring up bi representation. There's a lot of great representation in this movie. Like Larry, their whole relationship problem between Larry and Hank is that Larry doesn't want to be monogamous. Like, he loves Hank, but he feels stifled by monogamy, and Hank won't accept that. Hank has offered to do threesomes, but Larry's like, I don't want threesomes. I want to have my own separate relationships with people.
That part was so real.
It was so real. Like, I really appreciate the representation of like a non-monogamous character like that.
This is something that the gay rights movement has done for straight people. Like, there's no question that more acceptance of gay marriage and gay identity in the mainstream, and because of the more common non-monogamy that you see in a lot of gay relationships, it, no question, has increased the prevalence of non-monogamy in straight couples.
So Alan assumes that Hank is straight. At a certain point in the movie, Alan is like, Hank, let's just get out of here. Like, what are you doing here, man? And Hank is like, I'm gay. Larry is my lover. I love him. And Larry and Hank have this really sweet reconciliation where they express their love to one another.
They supposedly fuck in Michael's room, and everyone's like, can we go back? Can we go up there yet?
Yeah, Friedkin actually really wanted to include a scene where you see Hank and Larry kiss after they make up. And he thought it would just be cool to have that. And like, there are not romantic kissing scenes between gay men in movies at that time. At first, the actors like really didn't want to do it because they were worried about what it would do to their careers.
And again, these are all closeted gay actors who did not come out after, most of them were closeted gay actors who did not come out even after this movie came out and showed them being gay in career-ending performances.
But, the actors who played Larry and Hank agreed to at least film the scene. And then Friedkin had said, let's film it, and then we can all decide together whether or not we're comfortable with it being in. And so the actors, they were like, okay, you know what? We'll do it if you allow us to do it our way. So the way they decided to do it was to improvise the scene. And keep in mind, these actors, because they all did the play together and then the movie, they knew each other really well. And I think that created a really great dynamic. They're really lived in characters. But so what happened in the scene is Hank is sitting on the bed in Michael's room and Larry comes in. And the way the improvisation went is they just stared at each other for a while. Larry started crying and then Hank stands up and hugs him and they kiss. And it just really sounds like such a beautiful moment that they created. And they ultimately decided not to put the scene in. Friedkin felt like it was just too explicit, or not like...
He called it incendiary. He said it was too incendiary.
Which is, kind of crazy. Friedkin doesn't seem like one to shy away from that kind of thing.
No, well, he regretted it. In the original play, they didn't show the kiss. The kiss was off stage. Friedkin really wanted to put this kiss in the movie. They shot it. That sounds beautiful, as again, the way that you say they did it. They cut it because they thought it was too incendiary. Then Friedkin regretted cutting it. So, I mean, men kissing. Like, I just watched The Birdcage again, which is a movie from 1996. They don't kiss in that movie. This was just, I mean, people were like, I guess I could make a movie about gay people, but kissing? I don't know. That seems a bit far. Like, even to somebody like William Friedkin.
I mean, Friedkin had told the actors that they'd all decide together whether or not they were comfortable with it being in the movie. So it's possible that maybe it wasn't just Friedkin's call on that. It's possible that the actors maybe didn't feel all that comfortable with it being in there. But I don't know. And I wish we could have seen it. So Alan assumes that Hank is straight, and as I mentioned, Hank at a certain point in the movie proudly says, "No, I am gay, and this is my lover." And Crowley has said that he views Hank's character as the bravest of them all because Hank is really making a choice at that moment. The actor who played Hank, Larry Luckenbill, said that his whole life men would come up to him saying that his performance changed their lives and that it really made an impact, a positive impact on a lot of people. So, different people had different reactions to the play at the time. But on the note of controversy surrounding the characters being self-hating, there was an article I saw written by Ben Parman who said that many are quick to bring charges of internalized homophobia without seeming to comprehend that externalizing it might be a solution or the beginning of one. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Yes, some of the characters have internalized homophobia, but the play and the movie call this out and say that it's a problem and that it needs to change. And I also want to say there are happy characters in the play. They aren't all miserable. And that scene of a lot of the characters together dancing to the song Heatwave is so fucking iconic and so joyful. So it's not all just miserable. There are happy moments of true friendship.
Right. So this is like the moment of unbridled joy. And that is when Alan comes in and catches them. That is what they're ashamed of. They're ashamed of being seen as having fun and being happy and not being these symbols of pain. They're embarrassed by their joy, them taking joy in themselves.
And Alan says something about like, oh, Emery, when he's dancing with you guys like that, he wants to sleep with you. And he's making these judgments about what that moment was. But you as the audience know that's not what was happening. They were just dancing as friends. You really do not ever, as the audience, feel that Emery is like trying to make moves on any of them. Like it is just pure platonic friendship in that scene.
And this is what makes the play so great and what's so special about it and why it serves as a kind of treatise on this identity and not just like a gay love story or something like that. It's because it's about gay friendship and it's about this group of people who have this shared identity, this shared past, this shared future. It sort of reduces how defined by their sexuality they are in terms of like you're not just seeing them all woo each other and be in love with each other. These people, they just have this in common and they're friends, and that's what's cool. It's a great hangout movie in a way.
Friedkin, this is early in his career. He's made a couple of things before this, but nothing that really has stayed within the popular culture. Mark Crowley and his co-producer Dominic Dunne, as I mentioned, they originally wanted the same director as the stage play, but then they were kind of forced by the studio to pick somebody who had done a show before. And Crowley and Dominic Dunne, they were impressed with Friedkin's latest film, The Birthday Party. And that's just so funny to me that they were like, who should we get to direct this story about a birthday party? How about that guy who made The Birthday Party? Weren't getting all that creative about their choice in directors. So Friedkin, when he was approaching this, he really felt that the director is the interpreter of the script. And he really felt that he should follow the lead of the script and honor Mart's vision, because Friedkin viewed Mark Crowley as the real creator and driving force behind this. And he wanted to respect that through his direction.
And that's the nature of theater, too. I mean, it's a playwriting medium. And yet, of course, if you watch the remake before you watch the original, it puts Friedkin in focus as a director for me. I think it certainly did for me, at least. And Friedkin is a person who he's extremely tied to the New Hollywood era. There's no question that all of his best work is contained within this 10 or 11-year period. But one of the things that sort of comes to characterize his work is that he is a very fearless director, and he's not one that has a certain kind of specific set of themes that he typically goes back to, like a Scorsese does or an Ashby, you could say, in a certain way. Like, his style is a little bit chameleonic. He goes on to make The French Connection after this, and then The Exorcist and Sorcerer, and these movies are all pretty different from each other. And, like The French Connection, a lot of directors back then could have made. The Exorcist, not so much. And in fact, almost every other major director at the time turned it down. And this is because Friedkin was just kind of really interested in applying his talents to a project so that he could show things that had never been seen before. And yet, if there is a common theme that crops up in Friedkin's work, and certainly does not really crop up in any of his contemporaries' work, it is this interest that he has in gay life, because he bookended the 70s with these two films about gay subcultures, The Boys in the Band and then Cruising in 1981. Those are the only movies of his that have a lot of similarities, and no other director of the time or most other eras even touched on this subject matter. Friedkin does not define himself as straight, but he's mostly known as a person who dated women. So it is this fascinating peek into a director who's a little bit voiceless in a cool way in other projects. Like, this is the one subject matter that really did seem to interest him more than other stuff. And we can get more into that in a second, but
I'll get into it now. Like, Friedkin, when asked about being a straight director making gay movies, he said, "I honestly have never thought the idea that these were gay movies made by a straight director. When I hear that, it becomes a very hard notion for me to process, because I believe that there is gay and straight in all of us." And as you mentioned, he didn't define himself as a gay man, but he said, "I have to tell you, at the same time, I don't define myself as a straight man." And he said that what really captured his interest with this movie is the script. He wasn't thinking, "Oh, I really want to tell this gay story." He was thinking, "This is a great script."
Right. But again, like, it is a weird factoid about him that he made two movies about gay life in a time when nobody else was making movies about this subject matter. They were incredibly important films, both of them, to the history of gay depictions. And for me, it's just kind of like, if you look at Friedkin and his relationship to gender, like, I think it's a good point of contrast to talk about him compared to, we talked about Scorsese versus De Palma a while ago, right? And De Palma has this very lurid view of women where they clearly fascinate him, but he also just kind of wants to do horrible things to them and see them get victimized. But he is much more interested by women than men. Scorsese, on the other hand, as we said, like, much more interested, and Coppola too, it's kind of a lot of the guys are much more interested in men and how awful men can be. Sometimes there's a certain amount of how society has turned them into these monsters, but a very masculine energy. Friedkin, typically pretty interested in men, but it's in kind of a De Palma way. I think, like, Friedkin is sort of entranced by both the beauty of masculinity, but he also really wants to put his male characters through the ringer and have them suffer and see. And he is fascinated by the idea of these gay men being attracted to each other. He wants to show them feeling attraction, and he's very interested in showing the sexual masculinity in this and Cruising. But he's also unafraid of, showing them get their faces punched in and having them yell at each other and be dicks to each other. And Friedkin, famously a bit of a troubled guy, or not troubled, but he's kind of a tough character. Like, he's, a bit of a dick and stuff. And I don't know, just when you think about his comfort level with his own gender and sexuality and his relationship to, and what he wants to see men do with each other on screen, it's a weirdly unique insight that you get into a director's psyche, especially a director like this, who, as I said, primarily just known for being an amazing set piece director, who great special effects, really cool sequences. He's just a great director. But this was his voice. Like, if he had a voice in the 70s, it was talking about gay life in a weird way.
Who was it who said that, the best directors are the ones who are a little bi? Because
it was Paul Schrader. But again, that's another great contrast, because he's like more consciously bi, I think, in his work than Friedkin is,
because, and then that quote's referencing, you want to capture your characters in the most interesting way possible. You have to be interested in all genders as much as you can be, so that you're not dismissing them in a certain way or taking them for granted. He does seem very interested in the personal lives of his characters. But you'd mentioned his reputation of being kind of like a dick. And we talked about this a bit during the Exorcist episode. He would like shoot guns off in the middle of production to scare the actors and the cast members just to create like this source of tension and do a bunch of other awful things like that. But when I was listening to the commentary track for Boys in the Band, which by the way was my first experience listening to a commentary track, I'd never done that before. And I think it was actually kind of a bad example of a commentary track because I think it was just a totally unrelated interview that they just like put over top of the movie. But anyways, he had said that while filming The Boys in the Band, he tried to create a very comfortable space for everybody because it was supposed to be this intimate gathering of friends. So that crew and the actors, they'd all eat together on set. They'd invite friends to the set and they would hang out and drink at the end of the night together to make all the actors feel more comfortable in their performances on set. And that's just so wildly different than his behavior during The Exorcist.
We're talking pre and post Oscar and being at the height of his powers, though, too. I mean, again, maybe he would have taken a different approach no matter what, but there's no question that this was a movie that he took because he was a young director. He loved the script. He wanted to do it. He was very passionate about it. Famously, he was introduced to Kitty Hawks, the daughter of Howard Hawks, one of his old Hollywood idols, through Mark Crowley, and they dated briefly, and he had a meal with Howard Hawks where Hawks advised him, you got to stop doing these like froofy play adaptations and these like artsy things that no one's ever going to see. You should make some commercial movies. You should just focus on trying to make like the best car chase that you've ever seen in a movie. And that's literally what Friedkin did with his next film, The French Connection, and he won the Oscar for it. This was a real turning point film, and this was really, you could say, Friedkin discovering himself as a director. And it's just before he goes supernova, but it's really the beginning. This is really the beginning of his career, I would say.
Yeah, you're right. He decided to take a more mainstream approach after this film. Although looking back, Friedkin considers Boys in the Band one of his favorites that he's made.
And it does kind of weirdly go along with his philosophy that he adopts in the next few films that he makes, which are all about like, well, realism, because he's one of these guys who comes from documentary filmmaking. And I think it, unlike many other people, it didn't just affect his shooting style, but it affected his obsession with verisimilitude and putting you like really in a very lived-in room, feeling like you're seeing realistic action depicted. And what he was interested in, clearly, was showing you things you'd never seen before. You'd never seen a car chase this realistic. You've never seen a little girl seem this possessed. You've never seen a jungle shoot that looks this dangerous. And in this movie is also stuff that you've never seen before. I mean, it's still the same philosophy at work of trying to push culture and visual culture in film forward.
And he did bring a lot to this movie as a director. Friedkin had said that the problems that he had to solve for Boys in the Band were more stimulating to work on than the French Connection chase sequence, because he really enjoyed the challenge of keeping a film interesting that's basically all dialogue. And he was really inspired by that. And his experience working on The Birthday Party, which was also a single room movie, from what I understand, helps him a lot with working on The Boys in the Band, where it's just one small setting. Something he worked on a lot with this movie is the groupings of the actors in frame. Because when you're watching the play, you see all the actors the whole time, and the audience decides where to draw their focus. Whereas in a movie, the director is making that decision for you, and the editor is making that decision for you. And so Friedkin would try to mix up the number of characters in each frame and the groupings of the different characters to make it more interesting for you as an audience member. And sometimes he said this was a detriment. He mentioned there's this famous line that Emery says that's, "Who do you have to fuck to get a drink around here?" And that line actually became famous through this movie. That's now a line that you hear in other movies and people might say to one another. And that came from this play and this movie. Friedkin has said that in the play, that line is so much funnier because you're seeing the whole stage, you're seeing all the characters, and then Emery just pops up out of nowhere and says that. And it's just funny seeing him pop up and say that out of the corner of your eye. Whereas in the movie, it cuts to Emery. He's the only thing you see on screen, and he says that line, and it just doesn't hit as much. So, there is a lot of importance in the decisions that the director and editor make in terms of framing and blocking in the film.
Yeah, and just also the art direction is meticulous. From the very first shot where you see all of this toiletry set of all of these different grooming products, and not only are they all these very specific products, they have all clearly been used. You see these bottles that have been worn. This feels like a real apartment that people have spent a lot of time in, and that I don't know. He is just so good at putting you in the reality of these situations. And for the first half, I would say that his direction makes the play perfect. I mean, he's just, it's tonally exactly right. And then, in my opinion, he kind of runs into the buzzsaw of the telephone game that the play sets up. And in fact, I would say if there's anything that the remake does right, it's they somehow make the telephone game less interminably boring than the original movie does, because I don't know. I mean, like this is something that when it hits and it suddenly slows everything way down and becomes very repetitive. What the telephone game is Michael insists drunkenly that they all are going to call someone that they all love and tell them that they love them. And, you get a certain amount of points if the person answers and if you actually go through with admitting that you love them and stuff. And it's this classic theater problem where you can just feel the playwright. He wants to have a play that's just a slice of life at a birthday party, showing friends gabbing with each other. But you could tell, like an hour in, he's like, I need something to buoy the drama, to make something happen a little bit, to make this a little bit more. Why are we watching this particular day at this particular, like, what's so special about this story, right? And so he does this really contrived game where they all have to have these monologues and confessions and talk about their sad stories. And it's this theater thing where it's so repetitive. I imagine seeing the play live and you're looking at these 9 characters and you're being like, oh my God, I'm going to have to see him do it. And then I'm going to have to see him do it. And then I'm going to have to, so it stretches on in your mind as it's going to be as long as it ends up being. And for some reason, Friedkin, I think he just like really loses the juice, and it's just, he's trying to make things quiet and small, and it makes it too quiet and small.
I mean, I think this is a real weakness of the script, first and foremost. I do just think it's like boring what happens to the characters during the telephone game. I don't think that it's enough. I don't think it's revealing enough or exciting enough to warrant how much time we spend in the telephone game. So
the stories are all the same.
Right. So like, it's always like, oh, I was in love with this guy, but because I was gay, like I could never tell him, and that's sad, like unrequited love.
Or he was closeted and we hooked up once and he wouldn't admit it.
So I think that, that's where the weakness stems from. But Friedkin, he said that what he tried to do was he started the movie off full of light and movement and interaction between the characters. And then as the movie goes on, he changed the lighting, made it darker. He has everybody moving around less, and he has the camera slowing down so that it's just more static shots that are like close-ups of their faces to try and really emphasize their internal life and their internal struggle. And I think that works well for the very end, but I think that applied to the telephone game, which is close to the end, does contribute to the slowness of it and feeling trapped in that boring sequence of the movie.
Boring and fake, too. These characters have been acting very real. All of their interactions have been motivated by something. And then Michael just suddenly gets this hair up his ass about we're going to do this telephone game. Kind of comes out of nowhere. I don't know. I mean, I guess it comes out of Michael having this interaction with Alan, that Alan's like dredging up the past. And I guess, is it all to lead to he wants to make Alan call Jeremy, their other roommate, who Michael claims Jeremy said that Alan hooked up with them?
Justin Stewart, not Jeremy.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, there are 2 really important off-screen characters. There is Alan's wife, and then there is Justin Stewart, who was a college roommate of both Alan and Michael. And Friedkin says that at a certain point in the play, those 2 characters, the off-screen characters, become the most important ones in the movie because they're the ones who know the truth about whether or not Alan is or isn't gay. It also reveals information about Michael as well, because Michael used to date Alan's wife, and Michael had a close relationship with Justin Stewart. And you get the sense that Justin Stewart, who was gay, maybe had a easier time of it than Michael did. And maybe Michael was envious of Justin. And so the nature of those off-screen characters is really interesting. But the phoniness of it, I saw one quote.
The phoniness of it?
Yeah, well, the contrivedness of the telephone game. You'd mentioned it was very realistic at first and then had this contrived setting. But film historian Richard Barrios describes the movie as unnervingly real at the same time that it is rackingly phony. And I think that's true. And I think the telephone game brings that in for sure.
The whole thing is a performative aspect. Like, they're all performing for their friends, and that's part of what the whole thesis is about. Heterosexuality and homosexuality they both come to be seen as this performative thing by everybody. Michael is essentially accusing Alan of performing heterosexuality. It's what they talk about constantly, like the idea of, do you seem obviously gay or not, or are you acting straight, acting butch? It's what it's all about. And again, they're all like flamboyant, like Upper West Side acting theater types or whatever. So it's this extra touch of like, well, they're just kind of like that, So, but then when it comes to represent this entire group of people, it also starts to seem more contrived. So it's a complicated thing. Okay, so a really quick just discussion of the kind of tragic fates of these actors for, some of them at least. So, as I said, like pretty much the only one to have a real career moment after this was Leonard Frey, who played Model 1 year later and was nominated for an Oscar, Best Supporting Actor. Can we just really quick talk, like, how does Leonard Frey's performance in this movie affect how you viewed him as Model in Fiddler?
I mean, I was impressed. I was so fucking impressed. Like, halfway through watching Boys in the Band, I'm like, wait a minute. This is Model. Like, he's nothing. Like, his performance in Fiddler. Like, comparing Harold to Model, it's so impressive. It's amazing. Like, it was a really fucking impressive transformation. So, yeah, I was bowled over, and it really did make me appreciate Model more in Fiddler on the Roof.
Yep. Both are transformative performances. I don't even know what this guy's really like. I assume he's more like Harold in real life than Model, but I don't even know. I mean, what person has ever been like Harold? I don't know. So really, really impressive work from Leonard Frey. Cliff Gorman, as I said, he's a recurring actor. He plays Emery. I think the performance is pretty much wonderful. I love the character. The guy was straight, so that certainly affects, it's the most flamboyant character played by a straight guy. It is kind of just makes you think a little bit, but his career didn't work. I guess he played Lenny Bruce in the play version of Lenny, and then in All That Jazz got a sort of like consolation prize of playing the Lenny Bruce character in the boring parts that are about him editing Lenny. But okay, so Robert Earl Letourneau is the guy who plays Cowboy, who I guess we should briefly talk about.
Tex. His name's Tex.
Yeah, but they call him Cowboy.
Okay, whatever. He's supposed to be a midnight cowboy.
Yeah, right, exactly. And this is also, so he is a hustler who has been brought to this party as a present for Harold. And can we just like really quickly talk about, they treat having a human being, like they treat having a prostitute essentially, or a sex worker, as no one's really raising their eyebrows at this as like a gift for a birthday party. Do you know what I mean? Like how common was that? Like, it's obviously meant to sort of depict a different relationship to sex work that gay people have. But, like, I mean, was this a thing? Would people be like, oh, I brought you this prostitute to this party with our friends?
Yeah, I think they said he cost like $20 for the whole night. And I was like, damn, that's not a lot.
1968, so.
I know, but even then. But, yeah, I have no idea how common that was, but they all seemed kind of charmed by it and amused.
Yeah, and they talk to him about it. It's really sad too. Like they're all like, "Yeah, we own you" and stuff like that. And he's like very dumb and sad and like confused. And it's a really dark part of the story, honestly, how they treat him. But he's also treated like he's got it all because he's hot, and the rest of them are a little bit more insecure about themselves. So it's this weird thing where they're making fun of him, but they're also like, "Oh, but he's got it better off than the rest of us." And in fact, in the original off-Broadway production, they had headshots of all the guys. Robert Earl Letourneau was listed as the quote. They had all the guys were like his best friend or like the lovers or whatever, and he was called the present. And because of him being listed that way, the poster was not run in a lot of newspapers.
Which just is a further reminder of the context of when this film came out and the rampant homophobia that was present at the time.
I mean, I think some people would raise eyebrows if you made an ad now that like listed a human being as a present, but I don't know.
Sure, you're right. It's not just that. He was also a hustler, treated as a thing.
Which again, of course, though, is the point. But anyway, so yeah, this guy really felt like he had his career absolutely ruined and went down a dark, dark path. He turned to nude modeling and ultimately tricking himself. He had this whole interview that was all about like, look, Charles Laughton played every kind of part. He was a gay man, but never homosexual. People knew he was gay, but his public image never betrayed his public reality, so he was safe. I wasn't safe. I mean, it's just terrible. Like, he got sent to prison for assaulting one of his tricks, and he tried to commit suicide in prison and died of AIDS, as so many of these people did. I just have to say, this is so sad. Like, 5 of the actors and the original director of the play and the original producer all died of AIDS between 1984 and 1993. It is crazy. Just devastating and so hard. I mean, all of these guys that just dying in quick. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to belabor this, but the thing is that this movie was really kind of cursed for a lot of these guys. I just really do think that a lot of them, like, this movie was helpful for a lot of gay people, but for these actors, it was kind of a dark thing. Like, the guy who plays Larry, what was his name? Keith Prentice. I was sure I recognized him, but he was literally only in Boys in the Band and Cruising. He was the face of the Taster's Choice coffee thing too, so maybe I saw him there, but I don't know. But also, going back to the guy who played Tex, he claimed to have fucked Christopher Walken, and that Walken and Robert Wagner were fucking themselves the night that Natalie Wood was murdered. Yeah, I mean, this guy just like had a dark life and dark insight into stuff.
It is so fucking sad how many of them died of AIDS. Robert Letourneau, who played Tex, he was the first one to die. Cliff Gorman, who played Emery, Cliff and his wife actually took care of Tex leading up to his death.
Because he had been kicked out of his apartment, or his live-in caregiver had been kicked out of his apartment by his landlord, and he actually won a court case shortly before he died about this discrimination. But Cliff Gorman and his wife were then allowed to take care of him.
Okay, other actors. There was Kenneth Nelson, who played Michael. I thought he did a good job as Michael. I thought it was really good acting. He didn't really do anything else. He did a lot of theater, but there wasn't really much about him.
He did the Fantastics. He was the youth in the original Fantastics, so I know his voice very well. He's got a great voice. There's parts of this movie where he slips into like kind of a Kathleen Turner sort of little register. He's clearly got a great command of his instrument. He's a really cool look, too.
Yeah, he did have a cool look. I mentioned before, Lawrence Luckinbill played Hank, who seems kind of like straight. He's the one in a relationship with Larry. Friedkin thought he gave the subtlest and most extraordinary performance, and I could totally see that. I thought he was really good. Interestingly, he's the uncle of the Wachowskis.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. He also, he spent a lot of the rest of his life creating a bunch of one-man shows about historical figures, such as Theodore Roosevelt and Clarence Darrow. And I was thinking, is this a racket I should get into? Like, I just make a bunch of one-person shows about just, like, whoever I want. Like, you've heard of this guy, right?
Actually, I think you should. I think that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, and so Peter White, the guy who played Alan, he actually seemed like he had an okay life and career. He did a lot of work on soaps, both nighttime soaps like Dynasty and Dallas in the 80s. And also, he played a character on a daytime soap for 30 years. So he had a decent career. Reuben Green, who played Bernard, not gay. He clarified this in 2010. And then right after that, sources claim his current whereabouts are unknown. So this man people do not know where this man is at this point. Like, this movie is just, it kind of has a sad effect when you read about the actors. Like,
yeah, and then there's Frederick Coombs, who played Donald, who's like Michael's friend. One thing I really like about the play and the movie is that they're not all like the same level of friendships to one another. There's an in-group that's like Michael and Harold and Emery and Bernard and Larry. They're the in-group. And then Donald is Michael's friend. And so he's at the party through Michael. And then Hank is Larry's partner. So he's there through Larry. And then, of course, Alan is uninvited. And then Tex is nobody's friend. He's just hired to be there as a hustler. And so it's all those different dynamics come up throughout the movie, and to me add a richness to the story. But Frederick Coombs, who played Donald, yeah, he's, again, best known for this.
All right, so New Hollywood aspects. What did you notice? Would you consider gay people to be a particularly New Hollywood thing?
I would say that portrayals of characters who are not often portrayed in more classical movies is New Hollywood. Like, these are lead actors that are not your typical lead actor.
I mean, and again, Friedkin, who's a very New Hollywood director, certainly seemed very interested in the subject matter. So you could say that he made it to be kind of a New Hollywood thing.
I think like New Hollywood pushes the boundaries. And so unfortunately, because there weren't good depictions of openly gay characters, just having openly gay characters in your movie pushed the boundaries. And therefore, I do think that portrayals of gay life is a New Hollywood aspect for that reason.
Certainly not an old Hollywood aspect. There is also a darkness to this story. I would say that it's a very troubled tale of characters who psychologically are not in such a different place from a lot of other New Hollywood people. These guys are psychologically troubled, and they're very sad, and they're angry with each other, and they are very masculine in their way.
Yeah, definitely. And you might think that the ending is a bleak ending the way that New Hollywood movies often are. But on the other hand, I don't think it's as bleak as an ending as it seems. Michael's being terrible to everybody. Everybody's suddenly having a really bad time, and they all leave. And Michael has this big freak out. He describes earlier that every time he drinks, he experiences the icks afterwards, like ickiness. It just makes him feel shitty and guilty. And I relate to that so much. But then when you see everything that happens when he gets drunk, you're like, oh, well, no wonder he feels guilty afterwards. He's like, he's terrible when he gets drunk. I relate to it, but I've never acted as poorly as he did when he drinks. But despite all of that, when Harold leaves, he says, I'll call you tomorrow, Michael. Their friendship is not broken. Harold will call him and they will work it out. And Harold understands it's just, like, Michael is just having a bad time because he's drinking. And that's the problem. Larry and Hank, they fix their relationship at the end of the movie. And they're up in the upstairs room, like, actively having sex as the movie is ending. And Donald tells Michael that he'll come back the following week to visit Michael. So their friendship is still intact. And Michael calms down, and then he goes to church and reconnects with his religion, for better or for worse, because his religion certainly is related to his internalized homophobia. Friedkin had said that he thinks the ending is hopeful, and I kind of think it is too.
Yeah, it's a sweet moment. Michael has Harold leaves him with this devastating line that's like, you will never be happy because you hate yourself because you're gay. Maybe someday you'll be able to live a heterosexual life, but you will always be gay, and that's why you'll always be unhappy. And it's treated like he's saying this deep, dark insult, but at the same time, it's also he's just telling him the truth about himself. Like, he's like, there's an implication that maybe he should try and figure out how to learn to like himself. When everyone leaves, Michael freaks out. Oh my God, I ruined everything. And he comes to the realization, he's like, we should try and not hate ourselves this much. And it's a great moment with him and Donald, too. He's basically having a panic attack, and Donald forces a Valium on him, and it almost instantly makes it better. And they have a really sweet moment, and Donald says this great line, you are so much better than you were 10 years ago, which is basically like, you're a piece of shit, but you're still improving, okay? Like, you're not as bad as you used to be. And Michael's like, oh, get the fuck away from me with that self-righteous. So it's this really nice moment of that feeling of extreme guilt, but then your friend just kind of recontextualizes it for it, and you're like, yeah, you know what, I guess I will be okay.
Yeah, there's this really infamous line towards the end where Michael says, show me a happy homosexual and I'll show you a gay corpse, which is really fucking dark, and it was a controversial line. But, I was reading this one article that points out, if you think about the whole sequence of dialogue where that line occurs, it maybe isn't quite as much of a declarative statement as it seems. So let's just play the clip from that part.
If we could just learn not to hate ourselves quite so very much. I know. Inconceivable as it may be, you used to be worse than you are now. Maybe with a lot more work, you'll be able to help yourself some more. If you try, huh?
Who was it who always used to say, you show me a happy homosexual and I'll show you a gay corpse?
I don't know. Who was it who always used to say that?
And how dare you come on with that holier-than-thou attitude with me? With a lot more work, indeed. You've got a long road to hoe before you're perfect, you know.
I never said I didn't.
And so, yeah, Michael says, who was it that said, show me a happy homosexual and I'll show you a gay corpse? Saying that somebody else said that. Michael's not saying that. Somebody else said that. And that question goes unanswered. And because that question goes unanswered, it's almost like he's saying, you know, people say this about us, but that doesn't mean it's true. You know, and it's really calling into question that sentiment. And, you know, it is addressing the fact that, as we had mentioned before, a lot of depictions of gay characters in movies up until this point feature the gay characters dying. And
By their own hand.
yeah, like often suicide. And in this movie, they actively are not doing that. They tease that, but the characters all end up okay at the end.
Yeah, a downbeat ending, but not entirely the ultra New Hollywood bleak ending. I do think Michael is interesting as a kind of New Hollywood protagonist, to be honest, though, because he is an anti-hero. Like, he is full of self-loathing. He's full of vitriol, but he's also the driver of the action, and he's a protagonist. And it's not like he's completely devoid of feeling, as I said, defensiveness about not just, you know, gay people, but like there's a part where Alan starts talking about, oh, I imagine Hollywood was full of people who are so cheap and awful. And Michael's like, no, they're fine. Like, not all of them. Like, he's just like, don't tell me that you know my life, man. I can make fun of myself. I can make fun of my friends in my life, but you can't, man. So he does have a certain almost heroism in that moment. That's what drives him to sort of push Alan to try and admit his believed homosexuality. So Michael, I really do think, is a complex, very New Hollywood-y kind of anti-hero protagonist.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And this movie really interrogates a lot of societal institutions like heteronormativity, marriage, monogamy. You know, there's this one part where Hank says early on that he's married. And then when it's revealed that Hank and Larry are lovers, Alan says, but he's married. And everybody laughs because what does that mean? What is the concept of marriage? What value does it really have in a society where all of these men were forced into, you know, the closet and being in these relationships that they didn't actually want to be in just because they felt that they had to play these different roles? And the interesting moment of interrogating a lot of different things about our culture, not just gay versus straight. Do you want to do the Cold Stone rating?
Yeah. So Cold Stone Creamery, for those of you who are unfortunately in the dark about this, is a ice cream store where they have special sizes. Instead of small, medium, large, they have like it, love it, and gotta have it. So we just kind of were thinking about this one day and decided, hey, you know, we could describe movies in terms such as liking it, loving it, or gotta have it. So we appropriated this sizing system as a scale to rate the films that we discuss in this podcast. So we say we either like it, love it, or gotta have it, or we say it doesn't quite make the scale if we don't like the movie. So Boys in the Band, like it, love it, or gotta have it.
It's a like it for me. There are lots of things about it that I really appreciate, and it's almost a love it because of the richness of it, like the character dynamics, the characters themselves. Despite the stereotypes, I do think that there is a complexity to a lot of it. But I think for me, I wouldn't be so excited to watch it again just because of how boring it gets towards the telephone scene. I will always smile anytime I see the dance sequence. That will always make me happy to see. But
Even in the remake, that was pretty good.
yeah, even in the remake. But yeah, I think though, if I'm being really honest, despite how much I appreciate it, it's a like it.
And for me, it's basically the same kind of toggling except between love it and gotta have it. It's definitely not gonna be a gotta have it because the telephone game just ruins it too much, I think. And also, you know, I love fucked up behavior, but when a movie disturbs this many people, when a movie is this sort of upsetting to so many people who are LGBTQ, you kind of got to take that into consideration. I can't just be like, oh, they're just being babies about it. It's too close to home. Like, I appreciate it. You know, you got to take that on board, I think.
Although I will say, I think that this has been a reclaimed play and movie. Like, it was controversial for a while, but then when the revival play happened and actually won a Tony, I heard some critic was like, oh, we're allowed to like Boys in the Band again? So I think enough time has gone by that it can really be seen in the context in which it was made a bit better than perhaps it could have been seen at the time. So I think there are certainly lots of things to criticize it for, but I think at this point it has been reclaimed to a certain degree.
But I would say not quite as much as Cruising, which is a movie that was also horribly protested at the time. Like, a lot of gay rights groups were very anti-Cruising, and now I think Cruising is seen as, by a lot of people, like a real queer classic. Boys in the Band, I think, a little bit less so, perhaps because it's like kind of a less famous movie, but also just, I do think that it exists to sort of show gay life in a way that it seems like it's presenting perhaps like a mainstream vision of gay people that might make people upset, in a way that Cruising is about leather bars and subcultures in a way that people could be like, well, that's not talking about me. But anyways, I think Boys in the Band has been reclaimed, not quite as much as Friedkin's other gay work. But so yeah, so for me, it's a love it. And I started off this talking about like it's not a great work of art. I do think it's a great play, but I really was just talking about like the telephone game is such a weird, contrived, theatrical moment that it just kind of really does hamper the rest of it. But the construction of the play, the dialogue, the characters are really great and classic. So love it. I definitely think most people should see this movie.
It is a shame how underseen it is. It is worth your time, I think. That concludes another exciting New Hollywood adventure. Thank you all so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Kill Your Idols on the podcatcher of your choice. And please also do leave a rating or review. It's super quick and easy to do so, and it helps us out a lot. We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out to us on Instagram, X, or send us an email to klyouриdols@gmail.com. We want to say thank you to the Illuminator for our logo, and thank you to ourselves for everything else. Please join us next episode, where we will be returning to a familiar genre in New Hollywood, and that genre is crime. We will be covering Sam Peckinpah's brutal 1974 flick, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
Hey, Peter Fonda, how did we do?
We blew it.
Marlon Brando, Ellen Burstyn, Robert Evans, and Shelley Duvall. Sad endings 'cause of Watergate and Vietnam. Never thought I'd be so happy to see the old studio systems fall in New Hollywood. Weren't those movies good? New Hollywood. Weren't those movies generally good? Generally good. Generally good.
But we're having quite the big to-do this morning. We're recording the Boys in the Band, don't you know?